Very good.
And then I will share my screen. Can you see that?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, here we go. All right, Co-Chair Washington, anytime you can start.
Okay, I'm going to call this meeting to order. Rose, could you assist me with the roll call?
Yes. So, Commissioner Kariai?
Oh, yeah, yes, I'm here.
Commissioner Phillips is on excused absence, or she might be able to join us by phone, but she has a work session that she's at. And Co-Chair Washington?
Present.
Commissioner Marks?
Present.
Co-Chair Toya?
Oh, yep, no, yes, I'm here.
And Commissioner Weathersby?
Present.
And Commissioner White Hat will be absent today. And Commissioner Yellowhair.
Holiday.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rose. Our next item on the agenda is the land acknowledgement. Do we have a volunteer who would like to read the land acknowledgement?
I will give it a shot. My first
Fantastic.
time. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
The Flagstaff City Council humbly acknowledges the ancestral homelands of this area's indigenous nations and original stewards. These lands, still inhabited by native descendants, border mountains sacred to indigenous peoples. We honor them, their legacies, their traditions, and their continued contributions. We celebrate their past, present, and future generations who will forever know this place as home.
Thank you very much, Councilmember. The next item on the agenda is public comments. Do we have anyone here to make a comment on anything not on the agenda? Doesn't look like it. So the next item would be approval of minutes for January 4th, 2023. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
This is Commissioner Toya. I would like to make a motion to approve the minutes from January 4th, 2023.
Thank you. Is there a second? I will second it. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Okay, the motion carries and the minutes are approved. General business, there is none. Discussion items. That brings us to the water discussion with the city manager and staff from Water Services. City Manager Clifton, would you like to present that?
Good afternoon, Chair and Commission. I believe we have Brad Hill with us. I think there are many nuances to this discussion, but I see in the discussion item reference to the process for approving contracts and agreements. I might, if I may, Chair, ask that Brad Hill at least frame the discussion by talking about what has been the practice and what is currently in the code with respect to this issue. And then I can tag team with Mr. Hill and suggest to you, not suggest, but bring to your attention some administrative changes that we put in place a few years ago and what may lie ahead in terms of making those changes more formal. But I think the better flow of the discussion would be to hear first from Brad Hill, if that's okay. And Brad, I'm sorry to put you on the spot here.
No, that's fine. Let me introduce myself. So I'm Brad Hill. I am the current interim water services director. I have formally retired from the city and for the past 10 years was the water services director as well as the city's water resources manager. So I have a lot of history and experience with the city and in particular with the Reclaim Water program as it relates to water services. So in terms of this specific item about contracts and agreements, there are two overarching documents that guide city staff and city council. Both are approved by city council. The first one is what City Manager Clifton mentioned, city code and its various elements, and I can talk a little more in depth. And another one that you may not be quite as familiar with, but it was also adopted by City Council, and that is there's an overarching water policy document that in one of the chapters is about reclaimed water. And so from a policy perspective, it also guides staff on how to deal with reclaimed water agreements. I would like to say just a little administrative to put this conversation into context. The city has not created a new water customer, therefore a new water reclaimed water agreement since December of 2012. So that was 10 years ago. And the reason that is until there's some pieces of infrastructure in place in the reclaimed water system, we just don't have the volume of water, at least in the summertime, to allow for the addition of new customers. So it's been 10 plus years since the city's added a new customer. So with that, I'll kind of stop for a moment and hear any questions or comments or.
If anyone has any comments or questions, you should just chip right in.
So I know that the commission, oh, go ahead, Toya. Sorry.
Okay, mine should be really simple. My question would be, is that something on your end you see as good that we're waiting that long since 2012, or is that something that I guess there's a reason why we have to wait that long? So those are, I guess, my two questions.
So commonly the use of reclaimed water is for outdoor water use, irrigation or etc. And that's typically in the summer months, at least when customers have come to us and seeking a reclaimed water supply. It's typically for outdoor water use, which impacts summer. And because the city at this time does not have I'll use this term loosely, excess reclaimed water for the summer. We have elected not to allow any new customers for summer because of the struggles we have meeting peak day water demand during the summer. If there's a user that wants to use the water, if there's a customer that wants to use the water during a different time, the city would consider it, but typically they want to come in and use water during the summer. So that's the reason why we have not added any new customers in the past 10 years.
Thank you so much for clarifying that for my information. I appreciate that.
Of course.
Okay, I've got a few questions. One, I know that there was a request for the water services to be able to make this presentation by the commission. And part of the request was to ask several questions. One of them is, are there any caps or limitations to how much water is being distributed to any one vendor or, somebody that's leasing that water or renting that water or buying that water. Two, what considerations, because of climate change, has changed since 2012 with this current organization around water usage? And then thirdly, like, because of the changing in our climate here in Flagstaff, the way that water has been used in the past should be considered different, especially with Native Americans' considerations around the environment here in our area. And are there opportunities for some of that decision-making to come back to City Council so that there's more transparency and more opportunities for our community, including Indigenous? Sorry about that. Our communities, including the Indigenous, to be able to have a voice in how that water is being used. So a lot of questions, but I'll stop there.
Okay, yeah, let me see. We could take a few of these. I was trying to write them down. So the first one, let me tackle, and that was relative to caps on, I'm going to talk specifically on reclaimed water use. So historically, the city did not have only 2 or 3 prior reclaimed water agreements actually had an annual or a monthly cap. In 2015, because of the challenges that I just mentioned about meeting peak day demand, staff went through, and as each new reclaimed water agreement, actually I think it was before 2015, sorry, staff, as each new reclaimed water agreement was up for renewal, we began to implement a cap, because what we wanted to do was to address that peak day demand challenge in the summers. We wanted to make sure that we provided adequate service, reclaimed water delivery service, to our existing customers. And so we began to put caps. For example, and the reason for that is, let's say the public school district during a hot summer month would use excess water, or perhaps a golf course, and then that would impact our ability to provide water to all of our customers. So we did begin to implement that. And so now all of the reclaimed agreements have a monthly and an annual cap. That was the first question. The second one, relative, and see if I got this right, on climate change and water use. I'm not, what I didn't understand if it was specifically the question towards reclaimed water or all water, but let me first answer it as reclaimed water. So one of the things, the benefits of a community, municipality using reclaimed water is it is one of the most drought-proof water supplies, as opposed to a drinking water supply. And let me help explain what I mean by that. That is, reclaimed water comes from within inside the homes, inside the businesses, and commonly those, once water conservation programs are implemented indoors, low flow toilets, shower heads, etc., water use indoors typically doesn't change, even if it might get super hot during a seasonal month or climate change over time. Water use indoors stays relatively constant compared to water use outdoors. Over with climate change and it getting hotter, clearly water use outdoors changes. So I'm not sure if I answered. I'm going to have to ask you the other two, because I think they were related to decision making, and how can this commission get involved in decision making in terms of water use. I believe I'll answer it kind of in a general sense, and then I think maybe the city manager can help jump in. In terms of decision making, at least from the staff side, I know we do planning in terms of future water, whether it's water conservation, it's water resource planning, and so that's looking towards, that's quantifying how the community uses water today, and then how this community can use it into the future, based off land uses, zoning, etc. So there'll be opportunities for staff. And I know Erin Young, the Water Resources Manager, is on this call as well. She'll be working towards, in the next year or so, a water resource master plan that will help begin to identify how water is used currently and how water can be used into the future. And there'll be opportunities for the community, this commission in particular, as well as city council, to kind of weigh in on those planning efforts. I'll kind of stop there because I'm not sure if I got all there was a fourth one question, then I apologize. My notes, I'm looking at them. I'm not sure I captured exactly what that fourth question was, but I'll stop here and see if anyone has any comments or anything.
So I'd love to hear the response to the fourth question, but in addition to what you just shared in the decision making, one of the things that we understand as Indigenous people is that we're not making decisions just solely for ourselves, but we're thinking about future generations and what they're going to have because of the decisions we've made. So many times we make the consideration of 7 generations from now. So thinking about the drought that we're in, thinking about the city of Flagstaff's water use and how it not only impacts Flagstaff's future, but the region, because we're sitting right next to one of the major aquifers of the region, the San Francisco Peaks of Toko Uslit, as we, as Navajo people, refer to her as. What are some of those decisions? What are some of the opportunities for our younger people to be involved in that decision making so that they're not cleaning up our mess or correcting our mistakes, but actually being a part of that decision making process so that as we're moving forward as a community, as a society, we're doing it collectively with them in mind. And I know that changes business as usual because business means we're making money, right? But when thinking about our children's future, it doesn't always mean that we should have money as the catalyst or the motivator, but their future and the quality of their lives and the lives of their children. And that's something that the Indigenous Commission has brought forward before, and that's something that Indigenous people continue to believe in. So if you could help me understand,
Yeah.
Are there opportunities for younger people to be a part of that decision-making? And has that been a consideration about what we're leaving for them?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's I really appreciate that question and comments because it allows me to share something that what Flagstaff has been doing and perhaps it's not as well known as it could be and should be. One of the unique things about the state of Arizona is back in 1980, the state restarted to require municipalities in the urban areas, meaning Phoenix, Tucson, Prescott, to begin planning for 100 years. So I think it gets to close to your 7 generations that you were just referring to. And so what that means is that within those active management areas or the urban parts of the state, municipalities have to look at future growth potential based off of land use, water use, etc., and then compared to the water supplies they have on hand, and then make projections over 100 years to ensure that every resident, every business that's in that community will have a water for that long a time. So with Flagstaff, so I kind of set the framework in the urban parts of the state. Flagstaff has never, they're not in an active management area and has never had the requirements, meaning legal requirement to abide by those laws. However, in 2009, City Council authorized staff to begin to manage its water supplies under what are known as the legal term is adequate water supply. That's the state-based program. But it does, it's the city back in 2009 with council approval, and then again in 2013, began to look at its water demands, its water uses, its zoning, its land uses, and then compare that to its water supplies, the hydrology side of things, and began to link. So every time a city council would adopt a subdivision plat or approve for a community to move forward with to be built within the city, that there was a link between those two for a long-term water supply. Now, some might question a city looking at 100 years into the future. So one of the hooks in state law is while we look 100 years into the future by projecting, as I mentioned, the demand side and then the hydrology side, there's a limit to that. And so in Flagstaff's case, as I mentioned, in 2013, we were approved for so much water to allow for so much growth. And then there's a time frame limit of when the city will need to re-engage and reapply. So I'm coming specifically to answer your question on younger generations and when's that opportunity. So that opportunity is coming because the update to that plan, I believe, is going to be in 2030 or sometime before. But as Erin, as I mentioned, the water resources manager, she begins to develop a water resources master plan. That'll be kind of the precursor to reapplying to the state Department of Water Resources on this designation. So Flagstaff, even though it's not legally required to do so, has embraced since at least 2009 looking long term on how it manages and quantifies its water supplies and its future growth. So, unlike just one last comment, unlike many other communities outside of these active management areas, and you can pick one, I don't need to share them, they don't do that. They don't manage their water supplies by looking that far into the future. They're not legally required to, and most don't do that. But Flagstaff absolutely is a leader in Northern Arizona for doing so. And kudos to council for adopting those rules.
And I guess the last question, and I put a little bit in the chat, I'm just curious, what are some of the protections? Because we know that the state is looking at water sources north of their areas, like Phoenix Valley and such. They've already tried coming into negotiations with Navajo and Hopi as far back as 2012 and beyond, to try to get water from the northern area. What are some of the things that you're actively planning on right now or considering, knowing that they're going to be coming for our water at some point?
Sure. So I'll kind of split that answer into two, and it's going to be based on water supply or the hydrology. So in Arizona, in terms of groundwater, meaning the water we access via our groundwater wells, in Arizona, there is a prohibition of moving groundwater from one basin to another basin. So rest assured that the valley cities won't be coming for Northern Arizona's groundwater because that law is already in place, and it's been in place since the early 1990s. Now, in terms of surface water, that's a little different. You mentioned about, and I'm steeply involved in the adjudication of the Navajo and the Hopi water rights, and so that's a different conversation about how Colorado River water and other surface waters are being discussed and attempted to be settled. Those claims. Flagstaff is a party to those, and that's a whole separate process that I candidly don't want to get too deep involved in, just because there's a court-based process of how that's going through. And there's a whole set of laws that govern the Colorado River and both inside the state and outside the state on if that were to occur, how it occurs.
Thank you.
Yeah, nice to see your face too.
Are there any other comments from or questions from commissioners?
Chair, I have some comments that could follow up those of Brad Hill, but these are more in the narrow context of what we're doing administratively. Brad has talked to you a lot about what's required in the code and what we're doing as a resource management and also the protections that are in place. Obviously, one of the more significant narratives for the city of Flagstaff in terms of our water stewardship is what we've been able to accomplish through good conservation measures. Those accomplishments have been profound. Flagstaff could and should be looked upon as a shiny example of how to minimize our per capita consumption of water. Underlying this discussion, I do believe there are concerns by the commission as to how we deal with these matters administratively. And going to Mr. Mark's comments, what could be done to open up the process to allow more perhaps engagement. I want to share with you, and I might share screen here real fast if I may, if that's okay. And I want to put up a document that is somewhat on point with this discussion. Can everybody see this? Is just a half-page document. Is this visible?
I can see it.
Okay. I highlighted the last two paragraphs, and if it's large enough for you to read, I would invite you to read it while I'm speaking to you here. 3 years ago, this was in January of 2020, we put into place under my direction as city manager. Let me back up. We do some administrative directives from time to time. These are things that do not fall neatly within the city code, or they may add to what's in the city code, or they may qualify what's in the city code, but probably don't rise to the level of being codified just yet. This, I think, is one of those. At the time, there was an issue. There has been issues in the past, but there was then about contracts that were not finding their way to the council dais for discussion because pursuant to code or procurement policy, which is embodied in the code, these were set up for administrative approval. And I don't want to get into a lot of examples, but I think as a general statement, from time to time, that has become an issue with our community on things that were approved administratively that did not bring to the table the opportunity for engagement, as Daryl has noted, and to be more transparent and inclusive. So we came up with an administrative directive 3 years ago at this time. Please don't bother with all the text here. I highlighted what I feel is relevant. The first paragraph that is highlighted, not exactly on point. It reads as follows: if the community may have a high level of interest in a particular item or issue, please be sure to communicate clearly within the staff summary to the council what the area of concern might be. That's a statement intended to make sure that we give council a heads up when something may be of high interest or perhaps controversy. That's out of professional courtesy, so that our council is aware in advance that there may be some things that need to be carefully discussed. The last bullet item, I think, is more relevant, and it reads as follows: in matters of high community interest and or potential controversy, please obtain council input prior to the procurement of any outside services and prior to the formalization of any contractual relationships. Provide council with routine updates during and subsequent to the procurement or contractual process. Sorry for all the legal jargon there. The takeaway is, even with our code in place that might vest authority with us to handle things administratively, if we feel there's high community interest or likely high community interest. We do our part to try to get that to the council dais, even though we may not have to. The best example where that occurs is in our procurement policy. Under our procurement policy and other policies that, like the one Brad referenced, we may not have to go to the council to solicit approval of anything. But we can, as a matter of professional courtesy, and that's what this is about, is look, council should at least be apprised of these, but I think more important to this discussion, the community should have an opportunity to weigh in on things and share comments or concerns. It's not to say that others will have a decision-making authority, but at least it is placed on the agenda, which is public, and discussed in the council forum, which is also public. And that brings matters that would otherwise be dealt with administratively, pardon me, to the forefront. I'm going to stop sharing. This, I think, has relevance to some of the concerns by this commission and frankly to others in the community. It's good governance to not just have things approved when the community wants to have a voice in it and there are concerns. It's better governance to put light on that discussion and offer that opportunity. So this right now is just an administrative directive. We have those embodied in our website for us, the staff, to deal with. But this conversation has also come up now as, you know, the possibility to see insertion within our procurement code at some point, and hence it would be more formalized. I want to stop short of suggesting that all things should go to council. We can't do that to our council. They would spend endless hours every week going through a ton of minutia. On any given day, I probably sign 5 or 6 contracts. If all of those were routed to council, they would not have any opportunity to set policy or do the other important things that they do. So there's a proper delegation that occurs. But when things do generate that level of community interest, we want to make sure we're not stifling the conversation and precluding people from engaging in the discussion. So that's what this is about. Wanted to share that with you, and it may have relevance to this discussion, but I will stop here and see if there are questions or comments or thoughts about what I just shared with you. Thanks.
Are there any comments from the any commissioner regarding this topic?
Greg, I appreciate you sharing, and Brad, I also appreciate you sharing. I just wanted to make sure that the future generations of leaders and community holders, stakeholders to all of this, they're hearing this as well. I want them to understand so that, one, you don't have to repeat yourself, and two, that they don't feel like we're making excuses when we say we don't have the ability to change what water looks like and the use of water here in our community. So again, I appreciate you giving them the opportunity to hear by you speaking and sharing. I hope that they become more involved in the decision-making here in Flagstaff, because they live with the decisions that you unfortunately are going to be making when you sign all of those things. And like I put in the chat, there is controversy because there's not enough being communicated to our young people about what this looks like. So I'm gonna go ahead and step back from the mic, but I'll show you who we're all talking to.
Wow, Daryl, you have a crowded room there.
And we're only getting started.
Thank you for sharing. It is good to see the faces. Thank you.
I have a comment about, I agree with you, Greg, about not involving the council in minutia for most things, and I think that a lot of these things are routine, but there have been some significant controversies, particularly among the Indigenous community, about contracting for reclaimed water.
Mhm.
And so I would think that there are certain things that that rise to a level where the council should be involved directly. Um, and it wouldn't be every single contract,
Mhm.
but uh, and I think it's I think that when it reaches a level of controversy where a number of individuals or groups such as the Indigenous community have some concerns, they would like that size of the matter to go to council. And I think that there have been recommendations that the council um, uh, not delegate that level of a decision to staff.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I wholly agree with everything you said, and you articulated it well. So I cannot speak for our council. We have our mayor and we have a council member with us. But I do think that matters of controversy, policy matters of controversy especially, but it may even go, as we're talking about now, into the contractual world and in the services world. They should be given some light, some public light, I'm speaking of, and allow for that conversation to occur. It is not a thing of shirking responsibility or passing something along because it's controversial. It is rather a thing of respecting the desire for public transparency and discourse on very important topics, very important topics. And I would invite either our mayor or council member Matthews to speak on this, but I do want to integrate one more thing into the conversation and would invite my colleague, my friend and colleague, Aaron Young, to speak to this because I think it's germane to the topic of reclaimed water. We are very much pursuing and with enthusiasm, hopefully a pilot project there's a lot of things going on in the water utility, all in the interest of improving our water quality, whether it be wastewater treatment. But in this arena, we're talking about with reclaimed water, what are the technologies and the best practices that could enable us to make the water cleaner? And we know and we hear from many interests that we can do that and we should do that. It is a rapidly evolving technology, and the state and federal regulation does not yet encompass it like it should. But many local jurisdictions like Flagstaff elsewhere are trying new technologies to greatly improve water quality to the point where ultimately it lends itself to direct potable reuse, drinking water. There's a lot to what I just said, and I'm drifting into an area that I do not have expertise, but I love to listen to others who do, Aaron. And Chair, if I could ask Aaron to speak briefly on this topic, I think it would be informative.
I was waiting for a thumbs up to speak. I hope it's okay. Yeah, Greg, what you touched on is a very important topic and very relevant because there are regulations, potential regulations coming down on reclaimed water and wastewater quality that are likely to impact Flagstaff. And we're trying to be ahead of the regulations while taking advantage of a lot of funding that is available through primarily the Bureau of Reclamation, providing drought security, drought mitigation by allowing the advanced treatment of reclaimed water for additional uses such as direct potable reuse. In fact, just yesterday, I spoke with a gentleman hired by the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality to survey a cross-section of communities all around Arizona. ADEQ wants to know the perception of direct potable reuse, of the regulations, what people see as barriers and such. So I actually spoke with Rose this morning, providing her name as one of several ways that the survey community can connect with a broad cross section of Arizona. So I'm not really sure what else to say other than there's a lot happening in water to protect it as a resource for generations, to improve water quality, and allow communities to recycle it to the best of our abilities, because water is important in the Southwest. So hope that I touched on some things you hoped I would, Greg. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And are there any other questions or comments from commissioners? Yes, Councilmember Matthews.
Thank you. I just, and I don't know how relevant it is, but just kind of touching on a few things that Greg had mentioned. As city council, I'm my first month in city council, and it's been quite a learning experience. But what I have observed and absorbed already is that our council manager structure that's in our charter works very well. We as council members are out in the public. We're hearing what's important to the citizens, but we are not the experts in water, in all these different legal issues and stuff. We can express our interest in it, but I would be cautious to ever want to get involved in contractual procedures because that just really muddies up the waters and it makes it a less effective city governance. And we have great trust in our very highly skilled staff members in each department, whether it's water or not. But I love seeing our younger generation here. Thank you so much, Daryl, for inviting them into this very critical conversation. And I always would welcome, and I know the mayor and everyone else would welcome our younger generation to come in that public comment sections in the beginning of council meetings to just keep things fresh in our purview, and remember that there are voices out there that need to be heard. One of the things that is a very strong interest of mine is getting more community engagement, because there are so many other pockets of our community that are not being heard and are not being communicated. And I think the more we can do for outreach and invite different community members in just makes us a more healthy and vibrant community. And the Indigenous community is such a vital and vibrant part of our identity here in Flagstaff. And so I would invite all of your guests, Daryl, in your room to come join us periodically just to keep things fresh in our minds. But definitely, I would not want to read a contract and make a decision because my knowledge in that is very narrow. And so we have a good system, and I think we do a really good job of listening to our community. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. Let's see, there's on the discussion items, A and B, is B different from A, Rose, or um,
So I think that when we talked about this, these were two separate items. One, the A was really regarding the process, and the vote that the commission made back in June regarding the conversation about water policy and water process on how decisions are being made. That's one section where the commissioners had voted that somehow be brought back to the table so that the city council is more involved in those decisions rather than having rather than the current process right now. So that was the vote that the commissioners had made at that point. The second one was brought up by Commissioner Phillips and her concern for drought and water, and the state reporting a lot of reduction in use of water. So there were two separate, it's both about water, but they're two separate points of discussion.
okay. All right. With regard to that, I think it's so a more generalized view of water and the drought conditions and so on. Does anyone have any particular questions about that?
This is Commissioner Cuddy.
Yes.
I think this is a somewhat indirect, but then gets direct question linked to what we were talking about. Hearing a lot of word about the quality of water, which seems to be a priority. But the thing is, we won't have that if we don't have water to begin with. And what upsets me a lot, and I live outside of I live in what we're considered a county, but a lot of our taxes and everything is used by the city. Now, how is the city council dealing with managing, building new businesses, especially hotels, and where there's so much wastewater there, usage of the water? How are we managing that if we're not even if we are in the state of drought, a crisis right now? Why are we building all these structures? And NAU is building even more buildings. And I mean, for businesses, I'm sure that it's great for our economy here, but I don't think Flagstaff is gonna be like a ghost town anytime soon if we just quit building these buildings that end up using so much water. I don't get that. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Councilmember Matthews. May I speak?
Yes, definitely.
Thank you. And I just posted a little comment note. I don't know if Greg saw it, but and Greg can correct me if I'm wrong, but I hear a lot in the community, the concerns. Of course, we are in a drought, but the water shortages down in Maricopa County are different than our concerns in northern Arizona because they have a different water source than we have up here. And back to what was commented earlier, we have set a plan designed for growth up to, I believe, 100,000 population. And the city manager, please step in and correct me if I'm speaking incorrectly, for 100 years with the water wells that we have. And that planning is definitely something that is managed very closely as we look at new development and expansion. Is that correct, Greg?
Yes, and again, I will invite Erin to jump in because this is in her wheelhouse. This is exactly what Erin does. We have a future water supply. We do have a 100-year plan, which is really less than a 100-year plan because we do plan on plateauing in terms of our growth. At least that's what's projected at this point. And we do not have the same concerns perhaps as some of our neighbors down south. Again, I think that the narrative in Flagstaff is we are doing a very good job of being conservative with the water resources that we have, even though I'm respectful of the comment that was just made about wasteful development. I'm always reminded of how much we do accomplish here when I make a trip down to the valley and I see the level of growth and you know, the golf courses and swimming pools. It is different here in northern Arizona. But Erin, if you could speak a little bit to the plan, and you chatted already about potable reuse. And again, we're talking about taking wastewater, reclaiming it, and ultimately getting it to a point where it can be consumed again because it is pure. How that also factors now into the city's future water needs.
Sure. Yeah, and Councilmember Matthews, you're exactly correct in that the state of drought is sort of, it impacts different parts of Arizona differently because we're not on Colorado River water in Flagstaff. You know, we're not having to accommodate the cuts that other communities are. Our planning, I'll just hit on one thing before I get to what Greg mentioned, is our water conservation program. We actually have an award-winning water conservation program. Our staff are very, very busy. We don't hit every restaurant or hotel to, checking on, water use and maybe some improvements or interventions that we might make. So please email Rose to get in touch with me if you see something that we might help with. We have a fantastic rebate program. So I wanted to hit on water conservation. And in our designation of adequate water supply, which I won't repeat because Brad did such a great job highlighting what the designation is and how it allows us to plan, 100 years or more into the future. That designation of adequate water supply includes Upper Lake Mary water, reclaimed water use, direct reuse, the purple pipe that we know today, and then groundwater, water from springs in the inner basin. What the direct potable reuse and these new rules for expanding reclaimed water use provide us is with some new tools, new water supplies that we can add to that designation of adequate water supply. It allows a community like Flagstaff with a lot more flexibility in how we meet future water demands. We can compare direct potable reuse. We can see how that might offset Red Gap Ranch future pipeline project. That might be a cheaper alternative. It might be more expensive. It might meet community goals or goals of the Indigenous Commission when it comes time to making those decisions, for example. That'll be a very public process. So we'll have a more tools in the toolbox for meeting future water demands and being stewards of the resources that we do have. So it's a pretty exciting time because of these advancements in technology and in regulation. So I hope I captured what folks like to hear, or Greg, what you hoped I would touch on.
This is Commissioner Toya. I'd just like to say to Aaron, thank you for all that you do. And if I, for myself, or maybe one of the commissioners have questions, like I know Commissioner Phillips is not here today, I can, or we can direct, some questions towards you and maybe have you come back for another meeting at a later time. And we can maybe kind of discuss it a little further. If there's like some more sensitive questions that need to be asked, then I would appreciate that, Erin.
I would appreciate any follow-up questions that you have. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Greg, for directing us into this matter and just giving us pointers on how to go about understanding all this. For me, it's not too new, but I appreciate everything that has been said today in the meeting.
Thank you so much. It's actually quite an honor to be here. I have always enjoyed time with the commission. It's really gratifying to see the number of people that Daryl Marks has in his company. Glad to see the level of interest. These are important topics. Thank you.
Also, I'd like to add that Daryl's group is also really involved in Sarah Decter's project in the regional plan. So I'm really happy for that.
Rose, could I add something real quick to the regional plan that you just mentioned? Just a lot of what we discussed today will be providing that information in the regional plan. So like the rule that Brad mentioned about groundwater transfers from one basin to another, will provide that for the community to hopefully better understand, as one way to better understand.
Thanks, Erin.
Okay, thank you. We'll go now to the next item, informational items to and from commissioner members, staff, and future agenda item requests. Does any member have an informational item? I do have one. Well, it's more just a comment. At our last meeting, we selected the co-chairs with the express objective to have an experienced one of the co-chairs maybe having a bit more seniority and another commissioner that would be kind of moving towards gaining that experience as well. So what I would like to do with Commissioner Toya is co-chair Toya is perhaps alternate chairing these meetings. And I wonder maybe even starting with the next meeting, if you could lead that meeting. I think we could achieve our objective in terms of what we decided as far as the appointment of the co-chairs.
I agree. Co-chair Washington, I was actually prepared today to do so if needed, but thank you for giving me one meeting break. and I will be ready to go 100% next commission meeting next month.
Fantastic. Okay. All right. Are there any other informational items or agenda item requests? If not, then we will adjourn this meeting. Thank you for coming, everyone, and we appreciate the participation, the interest in the Indigenous Commission. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
We're gonna.
Thank you all. Have a good afternoon.
Agonet. Thank you, Brad. Aaron, everybody.
We're going to. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, they do.